It is Friday, October 17th. Let's talk PlayStation. Welcome back, everyone, to another Legends ZA episode of LTPS. As always, let's begin with our PS Plus reminder. The October PS Plus Essential lineup is still live on PSN, so make sure you claim those games, add them to your library. And this coming Tuesday, on the 21st, we have the PS Plus Extra and Premium October lineup going live on PSN as well. And as we saw from the most recent report from Bluepoint, it was true. PS Plus Extra is headlining with Silent Hill 2, confirmed going into the lineup on October 21st, alongside Until Dawn's PS5 Remake, so another semi-recent, I guess high-profile-ish kind of game, but it's a remake, so a lot of people did experience that game on PS4, but still, it's a more recent game that came out. As Dusk Falls is also on there, V Rising, Yakuza Like a Dragon, Poppy Playtime Chapter 1, and Wizard with a Gun. Going into PS Plus Premium, we have Tekken 3 on PS1. That's it. We did see that game was confirmed from the most recent State of Play, where Sony said that game would be going into the service at some point. The other weird thing, though, is that in that same State of Play, Sony confirmed Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition, and oddly enough, we had another separate report from Bluepoint that that game would be in this month's lineup. Now, that did not happen, obviously, and they're typically very reliable based on the info and how they usually get this stuff, how they source it. That's how they're always dead accurate with these things showing up on PlayStation Network. But the weird thing here is that the game actually is showing up on PSN with an October 21st release. So it might be a weird semantic thing of the announcement is actually reserved more for the Embracer side because of the Tomb Raider 29th anniversary happening sometime next week. So we might actually have that game still come out alongside Tekken 3 for premium. So it's not just simply one game, there is indeed two, which still is not a lot, but that's just the premium story of 1 to 3 classic games per month. It's a bummer. But I will say, Tekken 3, I'm very happy about that. Tekken's the one fighting game franchise that I truly enjoy, and I'm so nostalgic for Tekken 3, so it will be a trip being able to launch that game on PlayStation 5 and see it under emulation, looking nice and crisp. But really, PS Plus Extra and Essential was crazy good this month, or it is crazy good. I mean, having two very high-profile AAA horror games that are very recent titles as well, and they're so on theme, it's thematic to the month of October, so this was undeniably, I think, in my view, one of the best months we've had for PS Plus in quite a long time. Anyway, moving on to our first news story, we have a minor update for the PlayStation The Concert cancellations that we talked about last week, where, if you remember, we talked about the US tour dates for the remainder of this year getting canceled. Well, now we have more European cancellations as well, and these were shows that were previously rescheduled, so they were supposed to happen in May of this year, and they were pushed back to March 2026. So those shows are now getting canceled. One's in Belgium, Switzerland, I think 2 or 3 in Germany. So those are now getting canceled as well, which it's very similar to what we said last week. The big problem is really a handful of things, which is tourism and entertainment things are just not really doing all that well. That industry is really struggling right now. The ticket prices were really high. There's still kind of a novelty factor to listening to PlayStation music, I feel. So you've got all these things kind of butting against the idea of a PlayStation concert, and it just probably was not really viable. These places are not going to tell you that's exactly the reason, but in all likelihood, it is low ticket sales. Moving on to our next-gen PlayStation 6 news, where we have a new rumor about when the console will come out, and we are still hearing 2027. We actually had two things happen. One of them I did mention last week on LTPS very briefly, which was the new post on NeoGAF from Kepler L2, where they've been quite privy to the AMD product roadmap. And that one post actually blew up a lot more on Friday night, going into Saturday night, things like that. So it wasn't really, mentioned that much in LTPS last week, but they've been saying that for a while now. So Kepler has been doubling down on, yes, based on the SoC tape out, 2027 is the plan. Well, now we have something new that popped up, this one from Tom over on their channel Moore's Law is Dead, where they were speaking with Dustin Furman of Last Stand Media, and Tom says straight up he has documentation showing they're manufacturing these in the middle or even early 2027, that being PlayStation 6, and that's exactly when it will happen. They've been planning this as early as 2 years, Tom says, which, as a reminder for Tom's credibility here, he had direct documentation for PlayStation 5 Pro. It seems like a handful of people probably had access to that, but at least to the point of Tom's access in some way, shape, or form, at least something happened, because one of his PS5 Pro videos did get taken down initially before the console had a formal reveal. So with that in mind, that's still what's going on with PlayStation 6. The understanding is, based on the tape out and roadmap, they are planning 2027, which, there's been so much contention surrounding this topic, because while 2027 props it up in the standard 7-year time frame, and standard, that's not even standard per se. That was really something PS3 and up. Below PS3, it was 4 or 5 year console cycles, right? So nowadays it's already longer, but it feels extra long on PlayStation 5 because there's been that sort of 1 to 2 year gap where COVID made it very hard to buy these consoles. It also delayed games by 1 to 2 years. And so you're seeing a lot of big AAA games that already take 5+ years to make, take even longer to make. And so that's why it feels like we could probably go until 28, maybe even 2029. And then people will maybe start to cozy up to the idea of, okay, PlayStation 6. But 7 years is still about right. And here's the weird thing, too, with the whole conversation. I always find that it's more particular on a studio-by-studio basis when we talk about the amount of games we've gotten during this platform cycle. There's no getting around how games do take that long to make, obviously. But it's weird, because I look at this console cycle, or at least not even based on a generation. Let's just say the last 4 or 5-ish years. Maybe even we can dip a little bit into PlayStation 4, because games were still taking a long time to make back then too. But I think about that amount of time, and there's just been so much good stuff that has come out. Like I'm very I have a lot of conviction in saying, like, you could play 9 out of 10s all day every day and not run out of stuff to play. There is like a sheer saturation point going on in games where there's so much to play. But at the same time, you can look at one particular publisher, one particular studio, and you feel like there's this drought. So it's a weird push and pull, right? PS Studios has been pretty rough for some teams because they were basically reset with some cancellations, and that obviously sucks for that particular studio. PS5 this generation has still had a handful of games come out alongside any sort of marketing deals and publishing deals that Sony does, which locks these games down on PlayStation 5 for a year or two, and that's sort of padding out what used to be a lot of games coming out on a regular cadence from first party. But it's all about how you perceive it, right? But the weird thing is, I still find holistically there's just been so much coming out. There's so much good content to play across everything. And that's where it's, it's a little bit weird. We should also mention, too, because we don't cover this too closely, but at least on the Xbox hardware side of things and the rumor for that platform, it is sounding like it's going to punch well above its weight as far as the on-paper specs. That's something Tom's been outlining for a bit now, too. So that thing is going to be very likely not even a Series X scenario, but one that is going to, I don't want to say greatly exceed PlayStation 6, but they're going in a very different direction as far as the on-paper specs. Sony being much more mindful of rasterization performance and just being a little bit more savvy with price and going for this dedicated block on the SoC for ray tracing and doing the compression stuff and just trying to still stay in the more traditional console landscape. It sounds like Microsoft is very much going for a lower volume, very expensive box that will have that software layer that facilitates other storefronts as well. It might be a very different model by the time we have Xbox showing up to the scene. But that's what's going on the Xbox hardware side of things. Okay, let's get into some PlayStation Studio news, beginning with Bluepoint Games, where there was a new job posting spotted on their site for a senior combat designer, and under the minimum qualifications for this position, they are seeking, quote, a solid understanding of combat systems and mechanics for third-person melee action experiences, end quote. So that's where the speculation now comes in of, hey, Bluepoint, we know they were basically reset, as we were just talking about. They had to cancel a God of War live service game, still very puzzling, but, we're going to move past that now. What are they doing next? It's very helpful to get a sense of, like, okay, the genre is pinned down, but that's still very open-ended because that could be read as a Souls game, which they've previously done. It could also be God of War, which they previously did as well, because that was the thing that they jumped into immediately after being acquired by SIE is that the original content comment was fitting the profile for their work on Ragnarok as a support studio. And they're also very close with Santa Monica. They're ramping up the next God of War. Conceivably it could still be that role for the time being because they need that staff to be doing something. You can't have everybody work on a new property right away or whatever sort of new thing they are trying to spin up. So, speculation goes wild here. So it's helpful, but not really in the context of Bluepoint because that could go in either direction. Next up, we have another job posting, this one being at San Diego Studio for a senior graphics PC programmer on a AAA title, which I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like MLB The Show going to PC. Could it be something else? Sure, but in all likelihood, based on their pipeline, having the game now shipped reliably every year on Xbox Series and Nintendo Switch, I would think a Switch 2 version is getting thrown into the mix as well, but throwing PC into that lineup as well. So that was probably also on the roadmap anyway because Sony's been doing PC releases willingly, not even so much an MLB Association stipulation thing, although I'm sure that's in there, just a matter of over time, you should be on platforms X, Y, and Z. I'm sure they want to get to PC at some point. If anything, I mean, and this drought was the same case on consoles as well, but PC, there's nothing there for modern sports games, or rather, modern baseball games, I should clarify. So it seems like Sony has a pretty clear landing strip to be, shipping MLB everywhere, and they are the de facto baseball game. Moving on to a very minor update for Insomniac's Marvel's Wolverine, where we have the PS Store listing live for the game, and you can wishlist it on PSN as well, which that might sound inconsequential, but that is usually a pretty big milestone, is when the PS Store page is up and you can now pre-order the game. So there is certainly a high level of confidence that the game will be shipping on time in 2026. And as a reminder, we are going to see more news for this game fairly soon, spring 2026 as well. That's already been confirmed, and we would all safely expect that's probably a May or early June state of play. Next up, we have some sales data coming in for Ghost of Yotei. Nothing concrete from SIE, but we do have some sales data for Japan and Europe, and so far the game is doing pretty well, about the same as Tsushima, actually. So in Japan, Yotei was able to manage an impressive 120,000 physical copies in Japan during its launch week, and that fell down to 26,000 on week 2. But for context, on the first week, Tsushima sold around 212,000 copies during its launch week, and that's physical copies. And that's the big caveat there. So it is down from Tsushima, but that's a 5-year gap, which may not seem like much, but the physical and digital ratio heavily favors digital more and more from even just 5 years ago, right? So actually, there's a good chance that it might be tracking very similar to Tsushima. And then for Europe, we know that Yotei debuted at number 2 on the charts. It was only just beaten by EA Sports FC 26, so it just barely lost to that is what we're hearing. But what we did hear is that the sales are in line with Tsushima, tracking via digital and physical. So sounds like it's about the same, and reasonably speaking, whether it's a little over or a little less, it probably can still make more money than Tsushima, at least for those initial launch week 2 sales, because, well, Yotei has a higher average spend. It costs more than Tsushima. So overall, it seems like the game so far is doing well. SIE, of course, they're very picky with giving out sales milestones. If it's a crazy big, impressive number, they do like to put that out right away. If it's just kind of meeting expectations, maybe they'll do it, but probably not. It really depends. Oftentimes we have to wait until their fiscal reports for them to actually give us a number. In other Sucker Punch news, we have yet again the studio leadership reaffirming they only do one game at a time. And this kind of got weird with the separate headlines that we've been seeing lately. So there were 2 this week, and then the one prior with Nate Fox saying that the studio wouldn't really be all that psyched to revisit Sly Cooper, like 10% of staff, which is not that many people at Sucker Punch, obviously. So what happened this week was the studio co-founder and current head, Brian Fleming, he was talking very openly about what the studio will do after Yotei's Legend mode, and he said, quote, "Whatever we do next, whether it's continuing Ghost or going back to Sly, the decision is really more limited by, again, our cherishing of focus and time to iterate, which means that we really can only do one thing at a time." if we were good at juggling 4 projects, yeah, we'd have a remaster. And let's go do one of those, and one of those, and do some fan request. That would be really popular, but we only get to do one thing. So it kind of has to be your best idea, right? And that's really clarifying. It's not like there aren't 15 good ideas, but you only get to do one. And by the way, you only get to do one about every 5 years, so that choice is really important. So a lot to unpack here. He's saying Sly, but we know from the Nate Fox thing, there's not much people on staff that would even really want to do that. So I think he's just sort of putting it out there as a proposed idea, but it's not necessarily something they're humoring. It's an example of, hey, we have choices, but in the grand scheme of things, we are going to stick to one game at a time. The other angle of it too is like he's talking about remasters and that being all in-house, but that's the other part that Brian's not really at liberty to say. He has to keep blinders up and not speak on behalf of the parent organization, and that we all know if we want an Infamous remaster, if we want something done with Sly, maybe it could be a sequel. We saw what happens in that circumstance. It goes to a different studio, like Sly 4, for example, with Sanzaru. But let's not even say that it's a sequel. Something as simple as, man, it would be really great to get Infamous 1 and 2 playable on PlayStation 5. Just a simple remaster job, maybe do a dual pack, up-res the game, unlock the frame rate. I mean, that stuff would be great. Give it to an Iron Galaxy. Sony has to finance these things if Sucker Punch does not want to do it in-house. They can, sure. It sounds like based on the studio culture, the hierarchy, the well-oiled machine that they've established at the studio, they want to stick to one big budget, 5-year something game at a time. And that's a fine decision. It's just that he can't really say, yeah, we'd love to see Infamous be, ported by another studio or something. They can't really say that. So it's a weird mix of all these things that have been said lately from Sucker Punch and the studio leadership. At the end of the day, I would safely expect their next game is something like a Yotei, and if you want those other things, they're probably going to have to come from somewhere else. Moving on to a very big update for Sony's lawsuit against Tencent over their Horizon ripoff Light of Mataram game, where Sony has now filed a new 35-page response, and they're trying to deny Tencent's motion to dismiss. So it's as cutthroat as it's been. Sony's still not really holding back, so the document was recently obtained by the Game Post, and we are getting all the juicy details. So Sony is indeed asking the court to reject Tencent's nonsense attempt at getting the lawsuit thrown out, and that is the word they use. They call it nonsense. They're also saying that Tencent is playing a shell game by trying to protect itself of liability with all of its different subsidiaries, because that was an argument they were making. But Sony argues that Tencent Holdings at the highest level are the ones that own the domain and the US trademarks for Light of Mataram, and they're also the ones that recognize the full game revenue. They also directly call out the new delay to 2027 and how they changed the key art on the Steam page, and they're saying that this does not make SIE's claim any less ripe. They stand firm and call the response nonsense, and they said, quote, "The damage is done and it continues," end quote. Now, Sony does then make the same points again about the press and fans calling the game a knockoff, but they also get very particular about Aloy as a character. Her distinctive features make her not just a main character in the game, but a brand symbol that's synonymous with PlayStation. So all of this is to say that Sony wants to deny their motion to dismiss, and if the complaint is unclear, then they want permission to amend the filing and go right to discovery. So that means depositions, document requests, possibly being able to see things internally from Tencent when that stuff all gets, exposed. But that's the latest response, which it's, again, very cutthroat. Like, Sony is not holding back whatsoever. I'm still, surprised. I thought Tencent would back down, but also this is a company that has been doing a lot of this stuff. And that's really what has been, I don't want to say the norm, but it comes up more often than not that game developers in China, some studios have been really not even remotely subtle about copying gameplay mechanics, the general aesthetic of a game, or just the key principles of what makes a game special. A lot of examples of that have been popping up left and right. They're not even remotely subtle about these things, but oftentimes they're targeting IP and games and publishers that are maybe big, sure, but maybe not big enough to challenge Tencent in a courtroom, or they're willing to do that and try to attempt to take them down, or at least take them down a peg or two. I'm not sure if that would really discourage them, because obviously what we're seeing right now is them not being discouraged. It's just also the underlying context of these two corporations and what they were doing with this IP in particular, in that they wanted to make this game, they wanted to get the Horizon IP to make this game properly the way that they intended on doing. That's the accusation going on here, which that does segue into our next news story of a very interesting tidbit about how we might have possibly gotten a Last of Us mobile game of some kind. So what happened here was, in the documentation, in the filing, we also learned that Sony visited China looking for mobile partnerships. So they included a declaration here from the head of PlayStation Studios Mobile, Olivier Courtemanche, and we learned that they did visit Tencent and their studios. That includes Aurora Studios, the one that's making Light of Mataram. So anyway, we have a timetable of events here. Sony was pitched 2 times. One at DICE in Las Vegas, another at GDC 2024, and these were for the Horizon mobile game. And they rejected this via email on April 8th, 2024. Now, on May 16th, 2024, Tencent responded saying the team didn't want to work on anything else other than Horizon, and that they were passionate about the game, and this at the time was codenamed Project Z. In July 2024, the PS Studios mobile team went to China again to meet with Tencent and Aurora, and that was under the assumption that it would be for discussing a potential deal for The Last of Us. But instead, I guess what happened was they were looking at the slides, and the slides were for the Project Z game again, which at that point looked very similar to Horizon. So it's more so about how they were really determined to make this Horizon thing happen, and they did not have the IP. But what's so weird is that information we got from that, and that they went there to talk about a Last of Us mobile game, and instead were blindsided by, yet again, another pitch for Project Z, this Horizon game they want to do, but they are not allowed to do, and now they're still trying to do it anyway. So that's at least what the accusation is. But there's also an alternate timeline here where Sony was, well, I don't want to say alternate, they were trying to maybe see if something for The Last of Us Mobile could have happened, which I don't know what that would look like. I feel like The Last of Us is such a boutique, very special IP that if you do something on mobile, I don't know if tarnish is the right word, but it just, I think that would be so tough to pull off. Gosh, I don't know. That's just, it sounds weird to me, not good, hard to make work. But that's the thing, they explore these opportunities, doesn't mean they're always going to come to fruition. With that said, though, we are going to follow the lawsuit more, and we'll see how it plays out. But so far it's very catty, very back and forth, and arguably Sony is one of the first ones to really approach or challenge one of these Chinese companies and say, no, not on our watch, you're not going to be copying our game quite to the degree that you think you're trying to get away with. Moving on to PlayStation 5's Power Saver mode, which we are expecting is actually low-key a mode for this upcoming rumored PlayStation Portable that may ship in 2027. That is also the rumor for that device. But again, the Power Saver mode was available in the most recent PS5 firmware, but no games supported it until now, where Sony initially confirmed it would be Demon's Souls, Death Stranding 2, and Ghost of Yotei are the first games to get the patches. Well, Demon's Souls got the first patch live on PSN. It is available right now. It went live hours ago, so I've only just barely gotten to test it a little bit, but we can initially say, right off rip, 30 FPS for the frame rate, and it is indeed a lower resolution. So I'm still kind of looking at it, evaluating it. I'm sure Digital Foundry will also have some direct numbers as far as pixel counting for the resolution and more accurate frame testing. But for now, we do know that Demon's Souls is, this very well could be one of the first sort of natively-ish supported games on the PS6 Portable, assuming that's what the Power Saver mode is intending on doing to future-proof the library of software that we have right now. Let's move on to some third-party news here, beginning with Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, where yet again we have some comments here from the series director, Naoki Hamaguchi. Recently they were speaking during the Brazil Game Show 2025, and they showed a lot of confidence in this final entry, saying, quote, "Of course, I already have a clear idea of the ending for Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3. I think this conclusion will appeal to both those who loved the original and those who became fans of Final Fantasy VII thanks to the remake series. I'm confident this new game will be loved by everyone." Bold statement from the director of the game that they're working on, that they put a lot of time and energy into, and also it's a conflict of interest to say anything outside of really gassing up the project. So, I always like to make that point, but it's still a bold statement nonetheless that, hey, if you like the original or the remake series, you are going to be happy with that conclusion, which I think is going to be really hard to pull off because we're already hearing from many folks that Rebirth was, the ending of that can be very split for the general wide community for Final Fantasy, and who knows how that's going to splinter off even more by the time that third entry does show up. But hey, at the very minimum, you got to applaud the guy for sticking to his guns. Next up, we are getting more and more rumors for that Halo remake that we assume will ship on PlayStation 5. So this time around, we have a new post over on Twitter from the Halo Leaks account, and they do say they can confirm, so it's still rumor, but they say they can confirm that the game will have sprint and modern gameplay mechanics. And they also believe the gameplay will be similar to their new multiplayer project, which they presume is Halo 7's multiplayer as well. Where there's smoke, there's fire. There's been a lot of rumors going on now for this Halo remake project that may or may not be a thing. The Halo World Championship is coming up very soon, so that might indeed be the stage where they eventually confirm and announce this thing. But it will be very interesting to see if it is confirmed for PS5 day and date, and also pricing, the scope of how it looks, it being a UE5 remake, because that was the big deal with Halo Studios, is that moving away from their own internal engine, going over to Unreal Engine 5. How much of a ground up remake is it really? You would presume it is pretty much going balls to the wall there with adding sprint to the game, which that has been the hot topic for the Halo community because the game originally did not have sprint, and that really does change the gameplay feel for it. Just in a vacuum. But the other part of it too, at least on the PlayStation side of things, is that this will be, if it does ship on PS5, we assume it does, this will be the only version of Halo 1 to play on PS5. It's so funny that when this rumor comes up, the entire comment section is almost always like, okay, cool, interesting, it'll be crazy, but also like, can we just get Master Chief Collection? Because not only do people want Halo 3, which is a fan favorite, but really just to enjoy the games how they originally were, or at least as close as they can be to when they shipped on original Xbox and 360 hardware back in the day. But at least on Xbox platforms, you have those various versions at your disposal, whereas on PlayStation, this will be the only way to experience the Halo campaign. So it'll be interesting to see if there ever is a path down the road where maybe we get the original Halos as well. Moving on to Battlefield 6, where so far the game has sold incredibly well. According to Alinea Analytics, the game is over 7 million copies sold, which 3.5 of those were on Steam, and about 1.5 million were on PS5, which 86% of those copies sold were digital, but the game is doing incredibly well, and it really has sort of reignited that idea of, yes, Battlefield is back, but it's so back in the sense that it is a military shooter doing crazy numbers, and it's not called Call of Duty. That's the really impressive thing. But it's fascinating to see Battlefield 6 do as well as it is doing. And it must have been that long-term Call of Duty reign which has given people, just some reprieve of like, man, it would be really great to go to something that feels a lot different. And Battlefield does, for the most part, feel like a very different game compared to Call of Duty. But the other aspect of it, too, is that we can see Sony, which they don't spend money on the Call of Duty marketing rights anymore. So everyone's been noting that, like, hey, all this marketing spend that Sony would have spent on Call of Duty, they are, of course, doing it on Battlefield now. And there is a very close tie-in with Battlefield and PlayStation. In fact, there's some PS Plus bonuses that Sony outlined on their site. There's like tier skips, extended access to 2 XP events, and there's squad XP boost if you're a PS Plus member. So, Sony's really going all in on Battlefield 6. And why wouldn't they? Because, well, they've they've got the marketing spend for it, presumably. So it all kind of worked out in the end where they're still getting Call of Duty. It's still selling really well, and now they get to also be buddy up next to Battlefield 6, which has been doing amazing. Moving on to some big news for Ubisoft and the Assassin's Creed franchise, where the franchise lead on Assassin's Creed, Marc-Alexis Coty, after 20-something years working for the publisher, they decided to leave, and we initially didn't know why. We do know that the timing aligns with Tencent's new subsidiary, where the Far Cry, Assassin's Creed, and Rainbow Six IP are all shuffled under this new studio called Vantage Studios. So there was some speculation that this new position he was offered, maybe he didn't agree with it and he left on his own terms or something. And now he's confirming those suspicions over on LinkedIn, where he does mention that he was offered a new position at Vantage Studios, but it would not be the same continuity of work. It would be different. It seems like it might have also been reduced responsibilities, and somebody from the Tencent side of the organization, they would be filling in his previous role, which for him was just something that he did not want to agree with, and so that is why he left after 20-something years working on this IP, which it is a shame when those kind of corporate reshuffles happen, but pretty much that is always the case, especially with new owners that oftentimes want to try and throw new blood into a franchise or whatever sort of organizational hierarchy and products that they're working on, just all that political nonsense that comes with that kind of big corporate environment. So it's a shame for Mark, but for some that is either good or bad news, depending on how much you care for the Assassin's Creed IP and the direction you want to see the franchise go. But that was one big headline, is that the franchise lead is out, and now we know why, which it was what I think many were suspecting. Next up, a small little PSA here, but Jeff Keighley has confirmed that for Summer Game Fest 2026, it will air June 5th, 2026, and that's when we know that SGF will air next year. That'll be another 2+ hour live stream of game announcements. This year wasn't exactly exciting. Resident Evil 9 was really the big one, or RE Requiem. But that was really the big thing that stood out. That and the Lego Batman game was kind of crazy. Like, unironically, that was also the other big announcement for that live stream. But just based on what he can or cannot align for SGF next year, we'll see. And as we mentioned earlier with Wolverine, there's probably going to be a state of play in close proximity to that. So now you know it's probably, again, the same time frame, late May, maybe early June. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway, where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or X, and if you'd like to win a $10 PSN code, it is so simple. Follow the link down below or scan the QR code, enter the Gleam giveaway, and supporting this channel a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week, because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are some of the stories from this past week that I wanted to talk about with you all, and our Tuesday video was a very brief conversation about how I am finally sold, past tense, some of my things out of my game collection. Just a little talk about the things that I've decided, you know what, I'm ready to part with this. The big box collector's editions, controllers, but you can check out my methodology there. Obviously, a lot of people are quite interested in that topic, which I tried to clarify in the conversation. Most of it's already, like, the things that I want to sell are gone. I was not fielding buyers. That was simply a conversation from somebody that's been in the hobby and collecting for as long as I reasonably could, which was a young Ryan finally having a job and not having to sell games to buy games. But at a certain point, I think everybody has that sort of reckoning of like, I think it's time to maybe let go of some of these things. So I just had mine. But that was Tuesday, and then coming up, probably something else on Tuesday as per usual. Next week will be another Click R3 as well. So that is pretty much it. That concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.